We have a shocking Leafs trade update to go over today as a brand new report has dropped some shocking details surrounding Brad Treliving's trade plans as the trade deadline approaches. And these reports involve both Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton. We're going to break down these reports and discuss what it means going forward as it has Leafs fans absolutely fired up. But before we get into it, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. If you're part of the percentage you aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, so thank you for that. As we are on the road to 16,000 subscribers, there's just a lot to go over today. And there's some crazy talk surrounding, the Maple Leafs making trades. We obviously saw the JT Miller trade and all these different things that are going down. But a new report has dropped revealing some wild information. And let's start right here. So what to expect from the Leafs trade deadline per JT Bourne. And there's a ton to dissect here. Morgan Rielly will not be traded. Nick Robertson will end up being traded. One of either Minton or Cowan will end up getting traded, and they will acquire a top 6 center, top 9 at worst, and a depth defenseman. And we're going to probably cover this in multiple videos here, but I want to get your thoughts on this. We're going to be focusing more so on the Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan front, because after JT Miller got traded, it was kind of, the assumption was that Morgan Rielly wouldn't get traded. That was the only trade that would make any sense. But regarding Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan, according to JT Bourne, there's a very realistic chance and a very possible chance that one of Minton or Cowan are going to get shipped out of Toronto.
Yeah, and it's like Justin Bourne listed these things as least shocking to most shocking, because honestly, the last part there shocks me the most. It's not even the Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton thing, which we'll get into in a second. It's the fact that they're looking at a top 6 center and at worst a top 9 center, because all reports to this point have pointed towards a third line center, and that's not looking like the case right now. It looks like they want to get a second line center. So what happens to Tavares? He's not going to get traded. Does he move to the wing? Does he move to third line center? I think that's very interesting. That's a bit of a conflicting report almost with what we heard about them wanting to get a third line center to take the matchup game away from Tavares and Matthews, who I assume Tavares would be playing on the second line. So again, a little bit of a conflicting report there. I think it's very interesting. The landscape has changed a little bit. JT Miller's off the table, right? Mikael Granlund's off the table, which was another option for the Leafs in the last couple of days. A lot of stuff was picking up around that. But obviously, they're both off the table now. So now what happens? And the fact that Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan are named in this leads me to believe that they're going after a big fish still, like a second line center, which I think is very interesting. And I wouldn't even categorize Ryan O'Reilly or Brock Nelson in those categories. We know what those guys would cost, and it's not Fraser Minton or Easton Cowan. So it looks like they could still be going for a big fish to make a big splash this year, which was not on my bingo card this year for the Leafs. I thought they were just going to go and get a third line center, maybe some depth pieces and another defenseman, but it looks like they are ready to possibly shake things up a lot. And Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan, Nick, I don't know how you feel, but I mean, like, if both of them are on the table, I think I'm more open at this point actually to trading Easton Cowan, because we don't really know what we have in him too much yet. And Fraser Minton's made a good first impression to me. And I think he brings more to the table that you can't really find in the NHL already at a young age.
It's interesting. For one, obviously acquiring a top 6 center, top 9, that's something that we hadn't expected. We obviously were seeing the fact that the Leafs were actively involved in, like you mentioned, bottom 6 guys, Ryan O'Reilly, and there's Scott Laughton as well, regarding forwards and centers, and a depth defense as well. And the reason, I guess, that they're shopping Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan is because in order to get a top 6 center, you'd have to give one of those guys up. I'd be probably more inclined to trade Minton, but I can see the argument for preferring Easton Cowan. You're also probably going to get more value out of Easton Cowan as well, and because he obviously is a top prospect in the NHL, and things are just a little bit crazy right now surrounding the Leafs. And you can see some more reports here. Is it Brock Nelson? Is it Yanni Gourde? Is it Scott Laughton? Is it a long-term shot like Dylan Cousins, or even a longer shot like Miller? Whatever the case, the Leafs have been exposed at center as of late. The Austin Matthews line has been controlling its minutes, but past that, they're rolling out what feels like 3 fourth-line centers. They can't get anything going when their top line is off the ice. Now, obviously, this was before the JT Miller trade. This was before Yanni Gourde is out 5 to 7 weeks. So Yanni Gourde and JT Miller are off of the board now. But when you're talking about some of the other guys, if they're striving for a bottom 6 center, you're looking at Brock Nelson and some other guys like that. Now, if you're looking at some of the bigger fish, that's when you start to think about shopping Fraser Minton, and I think there is a good chance, and he actually elaborated more, the Leafs don't need a deadline where they add a couple bottom 6 grinders and a 7th defenseman. It's a weird year without any clear favorites, and the Leafs have as good of a chance as of any other team. They need to separate themselves with a bigger move. Again, they don't have a ton of assets, but to acquire a real player, they'll have to give someone up. Minton is a guy who would get another team excited. Who can play in the NHL today is at worst a very high IQ, two-way, third-line center. Cowan is the higher upside, higher risk on the downside play. Zero prospect who would just suit any selling team's fantasy. So this is the interesting thing now. Any thoughts on this? It seems like it might become a reality here that one of these guys gets shipped off, which makes a bit of sense, especially given where they currently are in their timeline.
Well, this has kind of come out of nowhere, I think, to a degree, because when you look at Brad Treliving in his history, this is not in his DNA to do something like a big splash like this or trade prospects and get a second line center at the deadline. He's more of a like trade for fourth line players and depth options at the deadline type of guy. He likes to build his team in the offseason. So again, it's kind of come out of nowhere. And, if they want to go off the board here, because, again, like you just mentioned, Yanni Gord's off the board, JT Miller's off the board, Mikael Granlund's off the board already, right? So we're running thin here at the options that we're discussing for the Leafs at third line center. I think it's Ryan O'Reilly. It's probably Brock Nelson. We kind of already know what they cost. It's not what we're discussing in this video, which is Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton. So who are they going to go out and get at this point? It might be somebody completely off the board that we haven't heard their name yet, and they have term, they're a second line center, maybe, something like that to really already start planning for the future, because Tavares has emerged still, I think, as a second line center. But the fact of the matter is his contract's going to change next year. He is getting older. They have to start planning for that. So this could kind of come out of nowhere. I don't see Brad Treliving doing it, but all reports are saying that that's probably what they're looking at. And honestly, that's what they should be looking at. We haven't been talking about it this season at all. It's exactly what they should be looking at, but I didn't think that they were actually going to pull the trigger in season. So very interesting. And again, if it makes you better right now and it helps you in the future, the next couple of years in this cup window, I think you wave bye-bye to Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan. It does not matter. I think you try and win a Stanley Cup in this window. We're not looking at 5 to 7 to 10 years from now. We're looking right now when you have one of the best goal scorers in the NHL and William Nylander playing the way he is, and obviously Mitch Marner having a great contract here as well. So I think that you go ahead and do it if you can find. We don't know who it is, right? Like, we don't know at this point exactly who they're targeting, but it doesn't look like it's any of the options we were looking at, because I don't think Ryan O'Reilly, we've seen it in the past, Ryan, especially at his age now, Ryan O'Reilly or Brock Nelson are going to cost Fraser Minton or Easton Cowan. Maybe a first round pick, but not those guys.
Yeah, let's not forget the Leafs don't own their first round pick in 2025. That got shipped off in the Jake McCabe trade. So, I mean, if the team really wants a first round pick, I mean, you can compensate that with giving up one of Minton or Cowan. And talking about some of the guys that are available, again, Yanni Gord is out now, so he's off the list. Mikael Granlund, he was traded. He's off the list. Everybody else remains available there. But it's not like Brad Treliving to make huge splashes at the deadline. But if he is, it will be for players that are under control, and that's what you'd want to get back. I mean, they're not trading Cowan or Minton for a rental. There's no world that happens. And maybe we'll see Minton on the way out a lot sooner than we may have thought. But a couple other things here to go over before we wrap up. Jarnkrok, that's another guy who's going to, in theory, be returning soon. Many seem down on him, but I think he's easily Toronto's 6th or 7th most valuable forward once he shakes the rust off. Maybe going to replace Ryan Reeves. And then, of course, we have Yanni Hakanpää, things like that. Again, I'm not going to talk about it too much. It's why they're looking for a depth defenseman. Any quick thoughts on Cal Jarnkrok before we wrap up, and maybe how that would factor into their trade deadline plans? We're talking about the trade deadline. Again, that's like a month away, but there seems to be a bit of a pseudo trade deadline here before the Four Nations Cup.
Yeah, there's a lot of, rumors and stuff flying around between executives right now that there is like an internal trade deadline before the Four Nations face off. So we're probably going to see some more trades this week. A lot's picking up. JT Miller just got traded. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but Jarnkrok, if he can come back and he can get back up to speed and play like in the playoffs or close to the playoffs, this is another really good player that the Leafs are adding to their lineup. So I don't know exactly what they're thinking right now. If they're going to add a second line center, Tavares moves down, maybe Jarnkrok comes back into the lineup. Things get very interesting, because where does Nick Robertson go, which we mentioned off the top? It looks like he will get traded. I mean, I would put money down on Nick Robertson getting traded at this deadline. There's no future for him with this team, and he only signed a 1-year contract extension. So it's going to get really interesting very fast as the trade deadline approaches. And I don't think Nick Robertson is long for this team. And Jarnkrok probably will play. It looks like he's progressing. He's been skating. So if he gets back up to speed, I think he's another very interesting option for the Leafs.
Yeah, let us know down below what your thoughts are. A ton of rumors circulating. We're going to keep you up to date with all the latest Leafs news. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. And do you want to see Easton Cowan or Fraser Minton gone? Let me know. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.